add an officer. This officer would also serve as a school resource officer, and then Clinton would like to update equipment to allow their officers to be better prepared, and they also need to attract and add additional officers. In the city of Clinton, both in 2017 and 2018, they had officers killed in the line of duty, and they feel like they really need this to be able to vote on this public safety sales tax. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Before we answer questions, we're going to call roll again.
Senators Gannon.
Here.
Crawford.
Here.
Carter. Here. Coleman. Here. Koenig. Rizzo. Washington.
4 members present, and we have a quorum. Are there any questions for the bill handler from the committee? Seeing none, we will take those in support first. In support.
I'm not aware of anyone that's coming up from the district to testify.
Oh, okay. Anybody here in opposition to the bill? Anybody for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator, do you have any closing comments?
No, just thanks for the opportunity to present the bill.
Okay. And now we will proceed to Senator Crawford's Senate Bill 365. When you're ready, Senator, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, for the record, Sandy Crawford, District 28. Thanks again for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 365. This bill would allow public administrators to pool their accounts when they administer estates where they serve as a conservator. Currently, this option is only allowed in Jackson County, Missouri. This account would basically work kind of like a lawyer's trust account. They put various people's money into the account, but then they also keep track of everything separately. So this bill would allow them to operate one checking account instead of numerous. In a few minutes, the Jackson County Public Administrator is going to come forward. His county has been using this plan for almost 20 years, and it's the only county in the state that gets to use it. So I think we have a pretty good expert in our midst today. So if you can imagine, I believe in visiting with Mr. Killian, he has over 1,000 people that he takes care of. If you can imagine trying to balance 1,000 different checkbooks, it would be a nightmare. Even in my own county, she has 30 plus people that she takes care of, and that means currently 30 different bank accounts. There's software available to help to handle this, and I think my expert's going to talk probably a little bit about that, but it will just make things more efficient. It will also allow them to pay bills separately out of this account, and it's going to keep track of if they were going to overdraw a specific account, a specific person's funds. That software will tell them that, so it really won't allow them to do anything. Wouldn't allow them to draw funds out of an account that weren't really there. Keeps track of everything, even the expenses and the income to the accounts. Everything is kept separately, but it's just all pooled into one checking account. As you can imagine, it'll make things much more efficient. The other thing that the bill does is it clarifies some language that we passed in 2019 for the public administrators, and it has to do with basically what we're going to do here is we're going to apply the same concepts to a transfer of guardianship as it is to the original appointment of guardianship. Whenever we did this bill back in 2019, that section was missed, and so we just need to clarify that portion of it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we have a really great witness and expert here that's going to be able to tell you any specifics that you know, because he's handled this specific legislation, or he's dealt with this for many years.
Okay, so let's hear from witness in support. Make sure you fill out a witness form, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Killian. I serve as the Public Administrator in Jackson County, Missouri. As Senator Crawford indicated, this is a bill that would expand the ability to use pooled accounts or shared accounts with other public administrators. We've had it active in my office since 2004. I've been in office since 2016, and with the office much longer than that, and so have good experience seeing how this works. In addition to Senator Crawford's comments, I would indicate that there is additional security that is applied to these types of accounts. And in particular, because they are likely to exceed FDIC limits, the banks, from the bank side, it looks like government funds. And so the banks will pledge actual collateral, hard assets to protect the balances there. Additionally, I would indicate that for each individual account, we still file accountings with the probate division. And so each estate is fully settled. The accountings are filed with the probate court, and they have an opportunity to audit those accountings. The reason for the revisions in front of you are really to have the statute reflect what's actually been happening with our audit. So we've not conducted full itemized financial audits for these shared accounts. That would be cost prohibitive. But what we do is an agreed upon procedures report and a reconciliation, and then the statutory language in front of you then revises the statute to actually reflect what we've been doing. Moving to the other bill, or the other part of the bill in front of you. So back in 2019, we looked for a revision that would require the filing of guardianship actions in the county where the respondent, so the proposed ward, is domiciled. Unfortunately, we missed the next statutory section that deals with transferring guardianships from one county to another. Current statute allows for a transfer of a guardianship if the residents of the client were to move to another county, and this would remove that option. We still have an opportunity to transfer a guardianship if the domicile of the client were to change. And with that, I'll open myself to questions. Thank you.
Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Next witness in support. Do we have a witness in opposition? Seeing none, informational purposes only. Seeing none, closing comments, Senator?
No, just thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. I move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? Let's see, a voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? I move that we take up Senate Bill 376. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. This is the bill we heard from Senator Trent relating to voting qualifications. I move that we vote Senate Bill 376 out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Gannon,
Aye.
Crawford,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Coleman,
Aye.
Koenig, Rizzo, Washington.
4 ayes, 0 noes. I make a motion to go out of executive session. Do I have a second? Second. We will begin now with hearing Senator Eigel's Senate Bill 98. Is the senator? Yes, he's here. When you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I am State Senator Bill Eigel from the 23rd State Senatorial District. I am happy to present Senate Bill 98, which has to do with a variety of reforms to our election process. Probably the biggest reform on the list, and there are several as this has got quite a few provisions in it, the biggest of which would require the removal of machines from our elections. And I want to be clear that under the current form of the bill, and I've distributed a Senate committee substitute to each of the members of the committee for their review, this would prohibit the use of not only tabulator machines and other electronic machines, but certain counties that are using poll pads to check voters in. Those are iPads. They may be able to connect to the internet. This is a bill that would get rid of all of them and restore us to what the state of Missouri did for its almost first 200 years of existence. That's going back to the hand counting of ballots. Now, this is kind of a controversial move, even though we actually counted ballots by hand for so many years. But the reality is having gone around the state and visited with many folks that are involved in this process, already in state law, we have procedures in our state code that cover the process of counting ballots by hand and making sure this is done so in a clean, efficient manner. In fact, ironically enough, since the introduction of using machines in our election, which is an offshoot of what we saw happen in Florida in the 2000 presidential election, we now see in our most recent elections that even with the use of machines, results are getting delayed, especially around the country, even longer than what we had when we had hand counting of ballots. So most of those procedures to hand count ballots are already in there, and this would address the concerns and possibilities that these machines may actually be used or may be vulnerable to interference in our elections. So that's the biggest part of this bill. In addition, this bill also ensures that the state can't unilaterally be entered into third-party organizations by the Secretary of State. Of course, as you're probably already aware, we've been a member state of an entity known as the Election Registration and Information Coalition, which is an entity that we were put into by our Secretary of State back in 2018. And believe it or not, we have released the private data as part of our arrangement with them of millions of Missourians to this organization. And this is an organization where we don't have positive certainty about what is being done with the information, nor where the information is being stored. So now there are approximately 4.2 million registered voters in this state whose private information, from driver's license number, partial social security numbers, birth dates, address information, who have had their data released outside the borders of this state as part of our membership. Senate Bill 98 would prohibit further memberships like that. Now, the good news is we are out of that at this point, out of that particular membership, but we want to make sure this doesn't happen in the future. There are additional provisions in the bill. There's one that has to do with ballot security that would require watermarks to be used on ballots. I think that's a common sense procedure we can use to make sure our ballots have the proper security before they go before the voters. And we do have individuals here in the room that will testify further on some of the specific vulnerabilities we're concerned about as it relates to the machines in our election. Madam Chairwoman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Crawford?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Obviously, you know, I handled that big election bill last year, and so I've learned more about elections last year than I ever thought I would know in my life.
Yes.
Have you sought information, or have you traveled around the state to visit with county clerks to see how these procedures really work, or are you just getting your information secondhand, or can you speak to that a little bit?
So I've actually spoken to both county clerks around the state, and I've spoken to election judges around the state, or folks just engaged in the process. In fact, I think one of my witnesses was involved in a lawsuit alleging certain vulnerabilities as exposed to the machines. And you know, there's a lot of protection from the official channels in local government, particularly from clerks that are very, they've been very supportive of these machines, as has been our Secretary of State. At the same time, I think there is pretty clear and convincing evidence that we may be exposing the state to certain vulnerabilities. Now, one of the biggest questions I get most often is, if we were to go back to hand counting of ballots, are we suddenly going to see delayed results? Is it going to cost a lot more money? Well, the reality is, when we were counting ballots in the past, within just a little, almost about 10 to 15 years ago, we weren't experiencing those delays. I've spoken to many election judges who have actually seen both sides, us using the machines, not using the machines, and ironically enough, they're reporting their results to their local county authorities at about the same time each night. So there are a couple provisions that I think will actually help the hand counting process, maybe do so even more efficiently than what we were doing back in those days. But I've gotten so much feedback on this issue, Senator, from so many folks, it's actually hard to keep track of it.
So you do not think the hand counting is going to take longer? That intuitively, that doesn't seem possible to me.
Well, so and that is what you just expressed right there, is the natural intuitive conclusion that, well, hey, if we can put these ballots into machines, they're going to spit out the results and it's going to be fine. In fact, I was just a couple weeks ago, I was down in Sykeston, Missouri, talking to some of the folks down there, and I spoke to an actual election judge that has been an election judge in Scott County for the past 40 years. So she actually had an opportunity to see both sides. And she approached me and she said, when we used to count these ballots by hand, it was a little bit more tedious, and there was a bit more labor involved. But we started that process, we got it done, and we would report our results to the county courthouse by about 8 to 8:30 each night. Now, since the machines have been introduced, there is less manual labor involved in that, but the process and the restrictions are still similar of when we can report. We have to be taken on the county courthouse, and believe it or not, we actually report it to the county courthouse about 8 to 8:30 on election night. It's about the same. So I think that we're going to actually see, because counties can actually still choose voluntarily to hand count ballots, and I think in the upcoming April elections, we're actually expecting upwards of maybe a dozen counties in the state to hand count ballots, and we're going to get more data on that. There's actually one county that I believe does hand count ballots. It's a small rural county, and I was actually, I don't know if they want me to talk about that, but this is something that we did for almost 200 years, and we're not seeing the kind of delays, or we didn't see the kind of delays in the hand counting process that we're starting to experience in our society today with the machines.
And one final question. I hear it from my county clerks all the time how hard it is to get people to work the elections. How much harder do you think it's going to get people to work elections when they have to sit there and count ballots by hand? Because I think that could be a problem as well.
Well, that's certainly something that, if that crops up as a concern, I think that there's a conversation we can have about that. If we need to make available resources to create the proper motivation to get folks to sign up for that, I understand that. I'd be supportive of that. But I think that the cost that we may incur may be certainly worth the reduction in vulnerability that we're seeing with the machines.
Any other questions? Senator Coleman.
Hi, good afternoon, Senator. So one of the things that has been complained about over and over to me in my jurisdiction is that we will have an appearance of impropriety, maybe even when there isn't one, because the way that things are released by precinct. And so it'll look like, with 85% of the votes reporting so-and-so is winning, and then they get a data dump from a big precinct, and then then the vote switches, right? And so suddenly there's like a come from behind. There's been several bills that have been filed in the past that would eliminate an ability to release data on an election, not just until the entire precinct has been counted, but all of the precincts within a given election have been provided, so that there isn't that opportunity in some jurisdictions maybe to find ballots or the appearance of finding ballots. Is that something you'd be open to including in this massive tome?
Of course. Happy to introduce something like that.
Okay. Also, one of the other things that my central committee is concerned about is the elimination of the presidential preference primary in an election bill that passed last year. Apologies to Senator Crawford. They really dislike the implementation of the caucus, and there's been bills that have been filed to eliminate a caucus and to go back to a presidential preference primary. Is that something that you could support?
I'd have to give that some thought. The caucus system has several advantages, and generally, when you're working through a caucus system, you get results from that caucus system that more reflect kind of the base of the party in question. So I really haven't given that a whole lot of thought. I was obviously a supporter on the bill last year that got rid of the presidential primary, but it's certainly a conversation we can have.
I think it's had some unintended consequences that are making people concerned about participation rates. So let's continue that conversation. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, go ahead.
Madam Chair, we do have some
Yes.
witnesses. However, I apologize. I am overbooked this
Okay.
afternoon, so I won't be able to stay, but we do have several witnesses here that can answer further
Okay,
questions.
we will hear from your witnesses then. We'll start with those in support. First person in support. Hi, make sure you fill out a witness form.
Yes, I did.
Great.
I have documents for you. Can I give them to you? It's important that you
yeah.
review them as I'm going
Okay.
over them with you.
Do you want me to?
Yeah. Oh, I think,
Well,
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
well,
All right.
it's everything.
Good.
just,
Here, can I, here.
Well, let me give
just
it to
hand
you.
them and we'll pass them down.
Yeah, pass them down. There
Yes.
you go. There you go.
And you have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Okay,
And make
thank
sure
you.
your microphone's on,
Hello?
please.
Hello?
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing us out today. I wanted to, I am probably the witness that he talked about that has a lawsuit against these machines. I wanted to express to you and explain to you guys how important this meeting is and how these machines are so vulnerable.
Excuse me, ma'am. Would you please give your name?
Yes, I'm sorry, Allison Grafe. The first thing that I provided you is there's a Excel spreadsheet that has all the counties. There are 50 Missouri counties that are currently using voting systems that are tested and certified by NTS laboratory. And then you can see the EAC FOIA that the NTS was never accredited. The only thing that gives these laboratories authority to test our machines are an accreditation. NTS, the EAC admits that NTS was never accredited in that FOIA. So it's important that you notice that there's 50 Missouri counties that are using a never accredited laboratory to test and certify our machines. That's big. They don't have authority to do that without accreditation. So additionally, in our Missouri CSR, in our statutes, it states that for the escrow, there's an escrow agreement that is NCC Corp, and that is the escrow company that holds the source code. They are an international escrow agency, and our CSR states that the Secretary of State, in order to have these machines, they have to be, you have to have two forms. It has to be of the source code, a human readable and a machine readable. And if you look in the NCC agreement, escrow agreement, it only gives the human source. So they're already conflicting with our Missouri CSR. So they started off not legal. And these all add, along with the laboratories that are supposed to be testing these, are in the law here. It states that the statutory regulations, Missouri 115.225, that no electronic voting system shall be approved unless it has been tested and certified by an independent authority that meets the voting system standards developed by the election assistance, by the Federal Election Commission or its successor agency, which is the EAC. And HAVA was codified into law in Missouri at HB 511 and states that it has to be tested by an accredited laboratory. The laboratories that are currently testing our machines are not accredited per the HAVA Act. So these add to many, many vulnerabilities of these machines. And it similarly to a intoxilizer machine, if the intoxilizer machine, if any of you guys are familiar with that, with the DUI or DWI, every judge and attorney knows that if they're not tested per law, per state regulatory, if there's any chink in the armor, those results from that intoxilizer machine are not admissible. It doesn't matter. And it's the same thing with our election machines. If they're not tested, if they're not accredited per the state law, which is HB 511, we can't use them. They're illegal. So why are we using illegal machines? Why are we not accrediting these machines? Why aren't we not accrediting the laboratories? Why is the Secretary of State not making sure that all of these laws are being met? I've informed all of them of this. I mean, we've got many problems just right off the bat that they're in conflict with Missouri law. And I think it needs to be fixed. And Senator Eigel's SB98 does that, fixes them, and we get rid of these machines because the people have lost confidence in these machines. So that's pretty much it.
So are our county clerks do they know that they're not certified, the machines aren't certified?
I have tried to get it out in every way I can. I think it starts, the election director, starts with Ashcroft. Secretary of State Ashcroft is to ensure that everything is met, which hasn't happened. And in turn, I'm in St. Charles County, and I took this to the St. Charles County Council, which then took it to Kurt Barr. In Kurt Barr, was concerned about this NTS because in 2020. There were 60 counties that were using Unison Open Elect 1.3 and tested by NTS that had never received accreditation. And he had told me, and I have the document here also, that it was Wiley Laboratories that had tested NTS. Well, you can see there's an NTS test report right there. So it wasn't Wiley at all. So I'm not sure if anybody really knows what's going on with this, with our machines, and what is actually being done, and who's holding anybody accountable for obeying these laws and these policies of the VSTL manual and everything down.
Have you spoke with the Secretary of State
I have.
one-on-one?
I have. I talked to him in person, and then I've also, again, I have him, I have a lawsuit out because I can't get anywhere, so I had no choice. But I don't want to be here doing this. I've never done this before. I'm so nervous. But it's my duty as a citizen with this information that I've found, that it's so important that you guys know that from the bottom up, there's laws and regulations and policies that are not being followed with these. And the laboratories are hired by the manufacturers. So their allegiance, it says on ProVNV's website, it says that their allegiance, their commitment is to their client, which is the manufacturer. So ProVNV, the laboratory that's testing it, is saying that their client is the manufacturer, not the people. So they don't have accountability to the people. They have accountability who's hired them. And so who's testing who? So there's so many things, and there's so many problems with this from the bottom up that we need to get fixed. I mean, these laboratories are not accredited. I don't know why. I don't know why I can't get answers. I keep getting dismissed on standing, but nobody wants to hear and nobody wants to give answers. So I just want to have secure elections. That's it.
Any other questions for the bill handler or the witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness in support. Hi. When you're ready, you may begin. You can lay it on the table there, sir. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Kim Reese. I'm with Missouri Council of the Blind, and I'm here in support of SB98 on this section 115.158, where it has accessible voting machines. And I'm thankful that Senator Bill Eigel kept that part in, because it's very important to the blind and low vision community to be able to vote privately and independently, and we need those machines for that. And it also states it prints out the same ballot as everyone else would receive. I know he's not here to answer a couple of questions I had. A little bit on, it says where the Secretary of State shall maintain a database on those eligible with disabilities to use the accessible voting machines. Some members are a little concerned about that, like what's the spirit and intent of that. They don't want to be singled out for their handicap. They don't want to have their privacy invaded. So I'm a little concerned about that part of the bill. But as far as the accessible voting machines, we're 100% for, because it's just so important to have.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next witness in support. You may begin when you're ready, and 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Wellborn. Thank you for this opportunity. I first became aware of our election machines back, of course, in the 2020 election, and I wanted to find out what was going on here. As I began looking at the machines and the EAC, I became aware of a deeper problem, which is the EAC not properly accrediting their laboratories, which oversee the certification of our voting machines. And then, as Allie mentioned, I learned that the manufacturer pays the laboratories to look over these machines, and not only do they pay them, but they direct the testing. So if they are being particularly slim on the testing, that's all that gets done. There is no across-the-board set. We also learned that these voting machine manufacturers actually are manufacturers of lottery and slot machines, and I'm sure you're well aware of the torch lawsuit for lottery machines, which is now in court. We are playing with slot machines, and these machines are only as good as the programmer behind them. There's always back doors to written programs. We know this. How else are they going to get into them? We also know that these voting machines, we were told, don't connect to the internet, which is not true. Anything can connect to the internet as long as it has a network card in there somewhere, and it can be in chip form. And you don't have to have a Wi-Fi connection in order to connect to the internet. You can do it hardwired through the electrical outlets. That's how they did it back in the day. That's how they did it when Katrina happened. They plugged right into the electrical grid to get Wi-Fi. These machines, the people do not have confidence in them. Therefore, we do not trust the government officials that are looking at them and making them a proponent of, ooh, we've got to keep them because we spent all this money on them. Let me tell you something. For all the money that we have spent on these machines, we could certainly pay poll workers and hand counters to count ballots for the elections. And I also want to say that what is very, very concerning is that in 2017, the Department of Homeland Security stepped up and said, oh, our elections are critical infrastructure. And they started rolling out a whole lot of cybersecurity stuff. The question is, if they're not connected to the internet, why do we need all the cybersecurity? Why do we need all the third-party NGO people in here, probing around in our state databases? Because that's exactly what they're doing. And the more money that we take from the federal government, the more sovereignty Missouri loses as a state, because we're just doing nothing but inviting the feds in here. And when they come in here, they don't come in, just for one thing. Because, oh, now they're offering our Secretary of States, you don't have to join our membership, but just call us and we'll probe your system. Excuse me, but they're in our databases, and we don't want the federal government in the state of Missouri giving us any more money than we need. Like I said, we would actually save money by doing away with these machines because we would no longer have to do the constant upgrades, and we wouldn't have to pay the millions of dollars for all the cybersecurity crap that they're trying to shove on us. So,
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, make sure you fill out a witness form.
I did that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness in support. Seeing none, your support? Yes. Okay. State your name, please. 3 minutes.
My name is Gerald Wistrand. I've been a computer systems auditor for the last 35 years. I'm certified both in systems auditing as well as system security. As far as the computer systems, whatever you use, whether you go to the ATM or you're using a home computer, you're susceptible to certain risks. Whether you get a virus, whether somebody actually breaches your system or leaks your information, you're at risk. So we're working, most computers do have vulnerabilities, but I'm not going to go into that level. I'm talking about management of the security of the system because we don't have technical expertise involved with the management of those systems. I mean, most secure systems, such as ATMs or Department of Defense systems, have a certain level of certification, but it doesn't stop there. It goes to the level of basically where you have secure configuration, they're monitored, they're managed, and they're patched. The current staff at most of these, the county election boards, county clerks, do not have that expertise. They're reliant somewhat on the county IT support, which may not be totally trained and experienced with a high level of security, encryption or stuff like that. And so they're quite significantly dependent on the vendors. Well, without totally managing the systems, you don't know what's happening with them. you don't know what's going on. So a lot of people nowadays have a lot of questions as far as the integrity and the validity of using the computers, and that includes the election computers. And the easiest way to do that and get away from that is to go with hand counting of ballots. It's done in the past. It's been effective in the past. It's been looked at recently, been run through trials recently. That's the best way to do it.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Witnesses in support? Okay. State your name, 3 minutes, and
My name is Dan White. I'm in the city of St. Louis, and I don't have anything prepared here. I didn't even plan on talking. But I'll just say I've seen and talked to a number of different highly qualified people who definitely say that there are major problems with the election machines. To name a few, Captain Seth Keschel, Colonel Sean Smith, Dr. Douglas Frank, and many others, Clint Curtis, Clay Parikh. These are people that have been in this field for a long time. So I'm not the smartest cat when it comes to that. I can't sit here and tell you. All I can tell you is intuitively there's a lot of vulnerabilities with the machines, and it's time for them to go. I can speak about the hand counting process since it was brought up. This is a process that's already been developed. It's in the 70s. The statutes from the 70s outline this in full detail. And there's a citizen in Missouri that has taken those and put them into a more organized fashion in a 300-page e-manual. So I would encourage you all to look at that. I've taken part in a trial of that process, and I can tell you that that process will get the votes counted way more inexpensive. It's way more inexpensive than using the machines. Same day and faster. So those three things: faster, cheaper, and the results same day. So I urge you to take a look at that. That's really all I have to say. And another thing that's pretty cool about this process is that the way the laws are written right now, it can actually involve high schoolers. So imagine that. We can have high schoolers taking part in our elections by law. It doesn't get any better than that. Thank you for your time.
any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next witness in support. State your name, please. Fill out a witness form in 3 minutes.
I won't need 3 minutes. Okay. Is it on? I can't.
Well, the bright green light.
I too, like Mr. White, have never done this before. I am not, I've never worked an election. I never have done any of that. And so I wanted to speak because there was a question on the committee.
Would you please state your name?
Lisa Maish. There was a question from the committee about getting people to work, and I volunteered for the first time. I will be working the election on April 4th. Like I say, I guess women aren't supposed to tell their age, but I'm a grandma, and so I have never had much experience with that, but I went to a training because I'm willing to spend that time to try to save the country, save our state, whatever needs to be done for my grandkids. And so I just want to encourage you that if, you know, it's kind of like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I'm here because I found that there is a county that's not very far from here that is going to go with all hand counting, and I wanted to be part of that change.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Go, Grandma.
Where is the form I need to fill? Is that it?
Next witness in support. Seeing none, opposed? First witness. State your name, witness form, 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Eric Fay. I'm the Director of Elections from St. Louis County Board of Elections. I'm the Democratic Director. I have a Republican counterpart who isn't here today, but I have some Republican colleagues from other counties in Missouri here with me. I'm currently the Vice President of the Missouri Association of County Clerks and Election Authorities, and our statewide association of all 116 election authorities opposes this bill in its current form. And the first point I want to make that my colleagues I think will reemphasize is that in Missouri, all the ballots are paper ballots. And after the election, we audit what happened on election day. We don't just take the word of the machine on election night and say that's the final word. So any election in this country, in the state, is audited. And that is a very important thing to remember. But I want to talk about just a couple points. Senator Eigel brought up that we used to do hand counting in Missouri for a long time. And there's a reason that we stopped in most parts of Missouri, because it didn't serve us very well. And I went and did a little bit of research on this prior to coming to the hearing today. And St. Louis County was the first county in Missouri to adopt voting machines. That was in the early 1950s. It's the old lever machines you've probably seen in movies or maybe in person. And in 1951, in April of 1951, in front of this very committee was the first time a bill to allow St. Louis County to use voting machines was heard. Republican and Democratic officials from St. Louis County came and testified in favor of it. And I thought there was a particularly interesting line from Mrs. Ann Becker, who is the Republican committeewoman from Creve Coeur Township in St. Louis County. And she said, she pointed out that precinct election officials are paid $6 a day. That's changed a lot. If the counting of ballots goes past midnight, the officials get another $6. So quite often it went past midnight in St. Louis County. Use of voting machines, she said, would not only save the pay of 2 election officials, but would eliminate the overtime payment because the vote totals can be taken from the machines at the end of the night. So I just thought that was interesting. Later on in the 1950s, St. Louis City had a proposition on the ballot to purchase voting machines for the first time. And this came about as a result of a grand jury inquiry in St. Louis City in the 1950s. And the grand jury, this is in 1955, this is an article from May 12th of 1955 from the St. Louis Globe Democrat. The grand jury found that the city of St. Louis should purchase voting machines to prevent further violation of election laws. And they went on to state that flagrant frauds such as stuffing ballot boxes, changing vote totals as they are tabulated, marking tally sheets for the wrong candidate, and deliberately calling voted ballots incorrectly are stopped by the use of voting machines. Further on, they say voting machines also assure a far more accurate count. In this respect, the election board said in St. Louis, election officials open the polls at 6 a.m., close at 7 p.m., and at the end of a long, tiresome day, when body fatigue is evident and nerves are on edge, come additional long hours of exacting concentration to compute the results of paper ballots. So there was, in certain parts of Missouri, there were quite often errors. The count would take hours and hours into the next day. And in some places, in my neck of the woods, unfortunately, there was often fraud in the count, because when you're counting ballots by hand, you're just taking the word of those folks there counting those ballots. And so the machines introduced a fraud prevention check that the votes would be registered on a machine, and then after the election we'd go back and audit that, because again, the ballots now at least are filled out by hand in St. Louis County and almost all of Missouri, and we go back and audit that. There's also the issue of cost, the idea that counting ballots by hand would somehow cost less. And I just want to say, I've been in this business about 15 years. I've done audits after every election. I've been part of many, many recounts by hand. They're always by hand in bipartisan teams. I've also observed elections in about 12 other countries. In many cases, the ballots are counted by hand, and it takes a very long time. And so the largest single cost we have in St. Louis County for any election is people. We employ about 2,500 poll workers in St. Louis County, election judges. That cost is over $600,000 just alone. So if we have to count all the ballots by hand, we're going to have to at least double the amount of people we use. And I have no idea where we're going to find these people. We barely get enough now to work the elections. So that's kind of beyond me. And there's also the Help America Vote Act, which was passed in 2002 by Congress. And if you remember, after the election in Florida in 2000, one of the main issues was that voters filling out those punch card ballots would cast the ballot into a box, and they didn't realize they had made a mistake, voted for too many candidates, or perhaps the Chad was hanging or dimpled or whatever. And so as part of HAVA, Congress mandated that voters be given the opportunity to correct their ballot if they made a mistake. And that's what these machines do, is they tell the voter if they voted for too many candidates for an office, or if the ballot is reading as blank, or that they've missed something. And so, other than for very small jurisdictions, which have an exemption, our jurisdiction, for instance, in St. Louis County, we couldn't get rid of the machines. They would still be there because we have to have them set up for voters with disabilities, like was testified to, which is a good thing, and that's required by law. And we'd have to program all those machines, and then the ballots those machines produce would still have to go through a scanner so the voter could see whether or not they made a mistake, and that would be, in our case, for all voters. But then we wouldn't take the counts from any of those machines. We would then count the ballots by hand. So we still have the cost of most of this equipment, and then we'd have to count the ballots by hand.
That's 3 minutes,
All right,
sir.
so I'll stop there. I have other colleagues
I'll
here.
let you go a little longer. You
All
had
right,
a lot of
appreciate
info
it.
there. Do we have any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Welcome, former State Representative Kurt Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Kurt Barr. I am the Director of Elections for St. Charles County. And I think that Mr. Fay did an excellent job talking about some of the history of the fraud that used to occur when ballots were counted by hand, and how the machines were designed to be a way to actually help eliminate a lot of that fraud that we saw was rampant in the 30s and 40s and up until the machines were used. But I want to talk about some of the other elements of the bill. So unfortunately, I didn't get the Senate committee sub that talks about removing the iPads as well, which is also problematic. But looking at the underlying bill, page 10, it takes the power and responsibility of finding election judges away from the election officials and gives it to the central committees. So not only do we have the history of the parties having all of this fraud, but now we're taking away the responsibility from the election officials to hire and train the election judges and giving it back to the central committees, who for decades have not done their job to provide the number of election judges. So it takes the shall away from the election authority, gives it to the central committees without any type of penalty on them if they don't. And then it gives simply a may to the election officials of providing election judges. So an election official could, under the letter of the law, produce an election where there's no election judges because central committees did not give them any election judges, and under the letter of the law, as this bill is written, that would be completely legal and horrible, absolutely horrible. So that's just one element of that I have a problem with this bill. The second is that it requires that the ADA compliant machines, on page 13, it talks about how we must have the election results as far as who voted within 48 hours. That is not doable. It is not doable, and especially under this new provision that we don't have the iPads, it is logistically impossible to comply with that element of statute. If the sponsor had talked to the director of elections from his county, I would have been able to tell him that, but unfortunately I did not have the opportunity to have that conversation with him. Next, about the ADA compliant machines. So the lady sitting directly behind me testified in favor because she said she likes these machines. Unfortunately, in the devil's in the details, the provision in the statute that protects these machines from vandalism and any type of abuse has been removed. So under this bill, any voter could go in and damage an ADA machine, could compromise an ADA compliant machine, and the law that would give a penalty to that is removed. Also, in this bill, it requires that the ADA compliant machine produce a ballot identical to a paper ballot. There's only one vendor that produces that. That would be Hart, which only St. Louis County uses. So every jurisdiction in the state other than St. Louis County would have to buy a completely new system, which is rather expensive. They're about $5,000 a machine just to buy those. Unfortunately, 3 minutes isn't enough to go through all the problems that this bill has, but I thank you for the committee's time.
Thank you. Questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next in opposition. Please state your name.
It's Clinton Jenkins, Miller County Clerk, and all the city people just took all my good points, so I'm back and clean up.
I get it.
I just wanted to give a personal experience to hand counting. I'm 45, so I wasn't around and county clerk when it was in place, but I am a third-generation county clerk. When my father was elected, my job, we lived across the street from the courthouse up a hill. My job was to run up the hill, get results, bring them back down to Grandma and her friends. It was not 8 to 8:30 at night when we were done. It was 2 to 3 in the morning. That's how far I made it at 10 years old, and then usually passed out shortly after. So that covers the time. It won't be 8 to 8:30 anywhere in the state. I am in a predominantly Republican county. I have issues finding Democrat judges. I am stressed enough to find Democrat judges with what I have. Hand counting, adding an extra approximately 30 judges, I don't know where I'm going to get those. The cost would add, basically $6,000 to $7,000 per election. On municipal elections, that cost is pushed off to schools, villages, cities, fire departments. Let's see. Now, being in a rural county, I have very small amount of staff. So I do the testing, I do the programming, I do the training for the judges. I do that myself. So I see how the equipment works from the jump, because I do it myself. And like I said, as a third-generation county clerk, I am not going to stake my family's name and reputation on using equipment or resources I do not trust. We do the manual count at the end of for one precinct at the end of an election. I have never seen a difference between what we hand counted and what the machine reported. But that's about it. I actually am doing a public test tomorrow on our equipment that is always open to the public. It starts at 9. If anybody in this room is bored and wants to attend, we do it and we promote it every time, put it in the newspaper. Nobody ever shows up.
Yeah. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Next witness in opposition.
Hello, Sharon Gowie-Jones here on behalf of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition in opposition to the bill. There are some pieces that we've seen in other legislation this year that are for good governance, and those pieces are fine, and we back the local county clerks in how they want to run their elections. And for similar reasons to what they've already expressed, we have serious concerns about this bill. Specifically, I just want to go back again to what the Missouri Council of the Blind testified to, which is the list of people who need the accessible machines. Having a list like that is problematic for a lot of reasons. It puts those people who are already vulnerable in a more vulnerable position, as that list will be public. Additionally, there may be people who are not legally blind but who have visual issues. I know I am getting to an age slowly but surely where I need large print things, and those people should have the option to use a voting or an accessible machine when they get to the polls. They shouldn't have to pre-register to do that. So I'm not going to go in at length, but our organization is for quality elections and voter access. We run the 1-800-OUR-VOTE hotline at every election, including this upcoming April one. where we help people figure out how they can go ahead and cast their ballot if they're eligible voters. And we think this bill has a couple of provisions in it that need to be removed in order to keep that access there. That's
Any
all.
questions? Seeing none, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Next in opposition. Please state your name. 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, member of the committee. I'm Jeff Smith, representing the American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri. We work to defend the civil rights and civil liberties of Missourians with a special focus on people's right to vote. To reiterate what the previous witness said, one of our biggest concerns about this legislation is the potential impact on people with disabilities. The fact that it's nice that Senate Bill 98 does allow for people with disabilities to use a voting machine, but it would require them to register in advance in order for an eligibility determination to be made. I'll read from section 115.226, number 2 on page 25. The Secretary of State shall maintain a database containing the names of all individuals eligible to use a voting machine designed for accessibility pursuant to this section. Registered voters may submit requests to be included in such database. Only registered voters who appear on this list may cast a ballot using a voting machine authorized under this section. There's no language explaining how that eligibility determination would be made, and just the fact that it adds another layer makes things more challenging, whether a person has impaired sight or Parkinson's. It does add an additional burden of pre-registration and an eligibility determination that is totally unrelated to people's eligibility to vote. Accordingly, we oppose the legislation.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chairman and member of the committee. My name is Marilyn McLeod. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Missouri, and we have several issues with this bill. I was really pleased to hear from the county clerks because they are the experts on this. First of all, hand counting of ballots does seem a step back in time, and knowing that there are audits done following the use of machines makes it clear that the machines are working properly. I know in Boone County, I live in Boone County, where they do this, and in fact, our county clerk invites the public to come in and watch the audit. So this is a very open and transparent process. I think the difference in counties and cities in terms of votes, there were more than 64,000 ballots cast in Boone County in November of 2022. It boggles my mind how you would hand count those because of the difference in the ballots. For example, there were 5 ballot issues alone on that ballot, not even including all of the candidates and other issues on the ballot. So hand counting doesn't make any sense. As to the voters with disabilities, that's been referred to already. This seems like an extra step. It's fine to have the machines, obviously, that's great. But to make people register so that they're known that first of all, that they are people with disabilities, a person could suddenly have a situation in their life where they have a disability. It would be difficult for them to vote, and why would they have had to register 30 days in advance? It doesn't make any sense. Why give more roadblocks to people with disabilities? There's enough trauma in people's lives as it is. As to the accuracy of the voter rolls and the use of interstate data, I have to say, as a person who registers voters, I was actually really glad to know that these checks are being done, that people say people vote in different, more than once. We say we're lucky if people vote once. If you look at the percentages of people who actually registered to vote or are just citizens and aren't even registered to vote, let alone vote, the more people vote, the better. Obviously, the best thing is clear those rolls and this kind of process is really important to keep those voter rolls clean. This bill also allows any valid voter in a jurisdiction to contest an election, to take it to court. That seems excessive and could lead to, I would think, chaos in the courts. And there's a provision in this about absentee ballots would have to be mailed first class and only from the county of the election jurisdiction, which seems absurd. There are people who are outside of an election jurisdiction at the time of absentee ballot who could not mail it in that county. I can give you an example. I have a granddaughter who goes to school in Minnesota. She is very interested in elections, and she would have to come back to Boone County from Minnesota to vote, or come back and mail her ballot. So it doesn't make any sense. So those are just some barriers.
Well, that's 3 minutes,
Okay,
ma'am.
okay.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next, in opposition. Anyone for informational purposes only? State your name, fill out a witness form, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Trish Vincent, Deputy Secretary of State for Secretary Jay Ashcroft. Many things have already been said, but I just want to talk about some things for informational purposes. In Senator Eigel's bill, he opens up Section 28, which actually oversees the Secretary of State's office. And he goes into a describing foreign entities, which is not defined in the law. The way that could be read is that we could not do business with anybody outside of the state of Missouri, which means that we could not communicate with the Social Security Administration, do the national change of address. We have vendors and security members that are do business in Missouri, but their company might be outside of the state of Missouri. So we have concerns there. In relation to the postmark that Ms. McLeod was talking about, that's for county elected officials to mail the absentee ballot. I'll give you an example here in Cole County. The distribution center for the post office here in Cole County is in Columbia. If the local election authority mailed an absentee ballot, it's very likely to have a Columbia postmark, and it's saying that, you know, it has to be a Cole County postmark. We don't control the post office, so again, that's problematic. I also want to talk about anyone eligible to challenge an election. That leaves it wide open for frivolous lawsuits. As everybody knows, we have an August primary and a November general election. It puts our local election authorities trying to get that certified, and if there's a frivolous lawsuit, they have a certain amount of time in which they have to print ballots for the next election. I want to point out that, you know, getting rid of these tabulators, which are not, I want to say this again, are not connected to the internet. We have some very large jurisdictions. In St. Louis County, although Mr. Fay didn't mention this, they have over 713,000 registered voters as of March the 23rd. Even if 25% of those people vote, hand counting those ballots, obviously, I just want to give you some numbers. St. Charles has over 285,000. Kansas City has over 212,000. Jackson County has over 267,000. Greene County has over 203,000. Clay County has over 178,000. So just information-wise, I just want to let you know, for some small counties that may not be an issue, but hand counting could be something that is at peril. And everybody looks at our website on election night. They want to see what the unofficial results, and they want to know that night. So again, for informational purposes, I wanted to make sure that you all are aware. Changing the ballot and having a watermark, and I believe he's also requiring the state seal, that's going to lead to additional cost, so which the state does pay for. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. I just wanted to bring forth some of those things for informational purposes that had not been discussed.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we will hear, let me get my stuff here together. Okay. Senator Schroer, Senate Bill 400.
Thank Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, State Senator Nick Schroer, District 2, St. Charles County, presenting Senate Bill 400 today. From a young age, I've been faced with a question which the answer changes from generation to generation. Why did the chicken cross the road? The answer to the aforementioned question has changed year after year, decade after decade, but today the answer to that question is very clear. That chicken crossed the road to apply for a second job as inflation has made his life a little bit more expensive than it ever was before. Many of our fellow citizens have not been able to use their land to raise even one chicken because of unreasonable deed restrictions, covenants, and similar binding agreements running with the land. This legislation merely allows property owners to own and pasture up to 4 chickens per 2/10 of an acre without being hindered by these types of restrictions. But more than just chickens, this legislation is about personal property rights. It's about liberty, and it's about the American dream. Allowing for families to own chickens on their own property is much more than offsetting the ever-increasing prices of eggs and poultry. Many landowners that are not held back by burdensome restrictions are able to use this opportunity to strengthen their families and give their children tools to achieve the American dream. This reasonable legislation also allows for homeowners associations to still regulate in a reasonable fashion perimeters around being able to own and pasture chickens within jurisdiction. I'm hopeful that the 2 members on this committee could support this bill and support chicken liberation. That will put a dozen eggs on every table and a chicken in every pot. And I have 2 very knowledgeable witnesses that are coming from St. Louis County to testify here today.
Oh, my. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, those in support? And you will need to state your name and fill out a witness form and tell us if you have a favorite chicken name.
My favorite chicken name is Lele.
Lele, okay.
Hi, my name is Josie and I am 8 years old. I want to tell you why I think having backyard chickens is a good idea. First, chickens are a good help when it comes to having food for my family. Raising chickens teaches life skills such as taking care of all God's creatures. And we learn where our food comes from. My family and I take turns and taking care of our chickens and making sure they have enough food and water. We also learn about animal behavior and health. Raising backyard chickens is a fun activity that the whole family can enjoy. We love watching our chickens play and grow. Our chickens are a good way to spend time outside and connect with nature. Please present it Bill 400.
All right. Any questions for the witness? How many chickens do you have?
6.
And they all have a name?
Yes.
Okay. And how often do you collect the eggs?
About once a day. Every day. Sundays we have to skip, but we try to do it
What's a day?
So you're not buying eggs at the store, are you?
Yeah.
Well, you're saving some money there. I think that's pretty good business tactic. Yes. Okay. You can go sit down now, and let's see if we have another witness in support. Please state your name and fill out a witness form, and I think you did that.
My name is Lily Murphy, and I am 10 years old. Today, I would like to testify in favor of Senate Bill 400 and to share with you my experience in raising backyard chickens and why I think it's an excellent idea for many families. First, raising backyard chickens can help me and my family have food. Did you know that backyard chickens can lay up to 300 eggs per year? This means that me and my family can have fresh eggs every day, which is healthy and saves us money on groceries. We share our eggs with our neighbors and friends, which is always a great feeling. Also, backyard chickens are a great source of protein. They lay eggs that are high in proteins and contain essential nutrients such as vitamin A, D, and E. Another benefit of raising backyard chickens is that it teaches us about responsibility. Me and my siblings take turns feeding, watering, and collecting the eggs and taking care of them. I love taking care of animals and being responsible for them. We also learn how to spot any signs of illnesses in our chickens and how to take care of them. Additionally, raising backyard chickens helps our planet. They produce fertilizer for our garden, which helps our plants grow. And they also eat insects, which helps control bugs in our backyard. A flock of just 4 backyard chickens can eat up to 332 pounds of household food scraps per year, which preventing this from going to landfills. Senate Bill 400 doesn't take the rights away from HOAs to regulate chickens. Many HOAs argue that chickens can be annoying to neighbors due to the noise and the smell. However, there are many ways to get rid of these issues. For example, my chickens are living in a well-built coop that my dad built. We use sweet PDZ or chicken kitty litter to lessen the smell. Also, some breeds of chickens are quieter than others, and roosters, which are the noisiest, are not needed for hens to lay eggs. This bill even says HOAs can still regulate roosters. In fact, many cities and towns have adopted regulations that allow backyard chickens with some restrictions, like the number of chickens allowed, the distance between the coop, and the neighbor's home. Many HOAs argue that allowing backyard chickens can have will lead to lower property values. However, this argument is not supported by evidence. In fact, many studies have shown that urban farming, including backyard chickens, can have a positive impact on property values by creating a scene of community and enhancing the aesthetic value of neighborhoods. Lastly, raising backyard chickens is a great way to spend time with your family. We love watching our chickens play, scratch around in the dirt, and interact with each other. They have their own personalities and interact with each other. They have their own and we enjoy observing their behaviors and learning about them. In conclusion, raising backyard chickens has so many benefits from providing fresh and healthy food to teaching us about responsibility and being environmentally friendly, and I encourage everybody to consider raising backyard chickens, even if it's just a few hens, and voting for Senate Bill 400. Thank you.
Well, I just might have to go home and have a conversation with my husband about getting some chickens. Now, you said your dad built the coop?
Yes.
And I assume you have a fence around it?
Yeah, we have screening around it.
Okay, so they have plenty of space to roam around
Yeah.
during the day? Do they wake you up in the morning?
No.
No. Okay. Wow. You kind of sold me. And what'd you say your favorite chicken name is?
Louie.
Louie.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, Louie. All right. That's pretty good. Yes.
I just want to know how long it took you to compile all this research. You seem very knowledgeable, probably more knowledgeable than most Missourians.
About a month or so. I love animals, so I like to learn about them.
Well, that's great. How old are you?
I'm 10.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you have some responsibilities around your house.
Yep. Every morning I'm the one to take care of them.
Now, are you the oldest child in your family?
Yes.
Okay. I knew you had some other brothers and sisters also. Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, do we have anyone else to testify in support? Anyone against the bill? In opposition? And anybody would like to testify for informational purposes only? I guess not. Everybody's leaving. Senator, do you have any closing comments? You know what? You can't beat that. No. I think you're done. This concludes our meeting of local government and elections. And do I have a motion to adjourn? And second? Second? Dismissed. That was great. That's great. That ended on the right foot. Yeah.
Just make sure. Yeah.
Oh.